see climate crisis from three perspectives. There's a first one that's global, in which there are freak weather patterns which could cause negative inflow of food supply and maybe can lead to an extinction level event. Examples of it live with us today. If you're familiar with what is happening in the Sahel Savannah with increased desertification, and even down here in the Niger Delta, with the ocean line getting closer to all of us. Then there's a national perspective in which we have for the post-oil economy, and the rest of the world is about to leave us behind. If you follow the news, I'm sure you hear them say 2030, 2040, 2050, everybody's going off the kind of cars you and I are used to today. And then there's a third perspective in which there are opportunities that we all can take advantage of to build a more resilient society. And at that point, what exactly happens is that we take advantage of our failures of today to fix our tomorrow. But before we talk about the solutions, let's do a quick run of how we got here. And I would love to localize our problems. In Nigeria, we're about 200 million people or more who live in over 27 million homes, who are served with less than 5,000 megawatts of power. That is less than 10% of what we require to run our country. Where does that leave us? It means we find alternatives to run our homes and small businesses. And according to the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, in 1 year, Nigerians spend over $12 billion to fuel their generators. Let that sink in. On the next level, where you have that large chunk of generators pushing smoke into the air, what do you have? Pollution. According to the World Bank, 11,200 people minimum die every year from health challenges related to air pollution in Lagos alone. We've not taken data, or we don't have data for other parts of the country. I didn't find them when I looked. Now, there's a third dimension to our problem. Over 40% of our agro-produce in Nigeria is wasted. Why? Because we do not have the capacity to preserve or process that produce because we do not have power supply. In the first quarter of 2021, Nigerians spent $15.8 billion importing food, Q1 2021. So what we see is a trail of imported inflation due to our failures. So what is our reality? If you grew up in the 80s, in the 90s, and you grew up watching the NTAs of this world or the state-owned TV stations, there was a constant. They put up this banner on the TV and they tell you, please bear with us, we want to change over our source of power. And in this era, what do we have? Nobody sees that on TV anymore. So if our so-called not very super media houses have transitioned, why not the rest of us? How can we fix this? Where do we start from? The first thing I say is advocacy. By that, I mean that we must understand that the people in government, when I say people in government, I mean people who work for the government, people who are elected into government, and people who are appointed into government do not know it all. Thus, we must continue to engage, to enlighten and educate them. Because while they may be professionals in their fields, when there's a different level of discourse or an area of discourse, they may not have that baseline of knowledge needed to formulate the policies required. So you must continue to educate. Then private actors must understand that a positive shift in how our communities perceive climate change is an incentive to continue to educate. What do I mean by that? If you have one new adopter of your service or your product in the climate area, positive area, solar, wind, biogas, it doesn't stop there. You must continue to speak to that person, to educate that person, and to let that person know that the person must learn to use energy efficiently. You may ask why. The reason is simple. Because every unit saved in one space can be added to the next user. And then, the last part of advocacy is all of us understanding that we must take responsibility. Because what we do not do today will haunt us tomorrow. The next thing we must do is that we must take up challenges. Why? Because obstacles create opportunities. For our case in Nigeria, we must eliminate 10 million generators over the next 10 years. And it's not just about eliminating the generators. When you do that, we can start by provisioning energy on demand using green sources like solar and wind and even biogas that are metered in our urban areas. Why, you would ask? Because our national grid will not do it for us. Do we want to keep polluting our environment? How many of us can sleep with the noise of the generator? The next thing we must do is that we should also set up mini grids in our rural areas that are designed for productive use of power. When we say productive use of power, what do we mean? We mean primarily mini grids that provide power that will support agro processes. Why? Because our rural areas form the baseline for our food security. Our rural areas also form the baseline for raw materials, which raise what we need to drive our manufacturing. So if we do not create energy supply for our rural areas, that economy continues to die. And what do you see? You see a continuous growth in rural-urban migration. The last bit of this is the fact that we must provision public transportation that may be operated using batteries. Why is that important, you may ask? First of all, we literally don't even have any cities with public transportation in Nigeria, except maybe Lagos that is trying to push an initiative on BRT. The rest of us, we just see ragtag vehicles that contribute to pollution, number one, then they contribute heavily to the traffic. So if we pivot towards green vehicles for public transportation in both rural and urban areas, we would have created a huge shift and a leap in our society. What are the benefits? Organizations that drive Nigeria's energy transition will do the country and the planet a huge favor and will reap bountifully if they focus on renewable energy, because they will be the first to drive a shift in the country. To the entrepreneurs, in the short run, A 5% transition to renewable energy will reduce our dependency on importation, improve our quality of life, and build a more stable economy. Because all of these monies that are gathered and spent on importation for food and fuel will stay where? Home. Now, to the advocates, we must keep educating one another, both people in government, both and the public people. To round up, we need to build more resilient communities in Nigeria and Africa at large. Not just one that responds to disruption and crisis by trying to bring the system back into balance, but by developing solutions that bring the system to a new state capable of dealing with present and future challenges. To you listening here, resilient societies are not built by governments. They are built by people. So the responsibility starts with you and I. Thank you.